Yep. Yeah, so we have Josh Fields in here, so definitely a buddy of Dan's and a buddy of mine and a long time coming. So we got you on the podcast. Thanks for coming on this morning.
Thanks for making the time, fellas. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So you hunt in possibly one of the toughest places to hunt elk up in northern Montana there and consistently find good bulls. Man, that's a mission up there.
Well, a wise guy told me once, he said, you know, Josh, there's a lot of animals out there, and I can tell you where they're not, and it's not northwest Montana. So we'll give credit to Dan Pickar on that. And so, yeah, it's tough, nasty, steep, deep country, but it's home, and I'm a slow learner, so that's why I'm still up there.
Well, you're a quick learner because you get her done up there. And I grew up hunting up there as well, and I've told several guys that, honestly, like growing up hunting in northwest Montana, just the difficulty, the lack of animals, it has prepared me to hunt all these other places. And it really opened my eyes to be like, wow, like I was missing out as a kid. Like, this is not good hunting.
Yes.
You know, but they're there. There's animals there, obviously.
Yes.
It's just density.
And that's the one reason I'm still up there is, first of all, I live there and can still find an animal. And it might take a long time. You know the deal, right? Most guys get their token week of hunting, vacation. It could take you a whole week to find that one elk. But if you've been there and done it, you know that it can happen in a moment's notice. And to kind of right off the coattails of what you said, it's prepared you for other places. Absolutely, it has, right? Yeah. The one thing that it did do for me when I started to get out of there was to broaden my horizons, because it's steep, deep, it's thick, you know. I'm a really good archery shot because I shoot bulls from 10 to 20 yards, you know. I branch out a little bit like you guys do. You guys are very, very well-rounded in the spot and stock game and being able to sneak in and play the wind and all that stuff, and that's what I had to learn leaving northwest Montana. But overall, it gives you a skill set that I'm very blessed to be able to grow up and hunt that stuff. So.
Yeah.
Man, they can grow big and heavy in there too, you know. It's like when you do find one, and part of the, like, your tactics is a perfect fit for your job. Like we're Rocky Mountain calls and work with these calls, work to develop calls, and then like up there in northern Montana, there's like a lot of timber. Like you can't glass a lot of country. You got to hunt your way through it, and so then you're reliant upon trying to get these bulls to answer back or trying to get them to respond to calls. And it's also difficult in that timber country to figure out where elk like, because you can't glass it; it doesn't lay out. So as you're hiking, you got to like look for these benches or look for their bedding timber or where they're feeding, right?
That is a great point. You know, Dan can attest to this. That's the most beautiful country I'm partial in the world. But sometimes it's so beautiful and so good, the elk don't even know about it. So you got to spend a lot of time finding them. And you're absolutely right, Brian. If you do not, I wouldn't say know how to call, but if you can't get them, locate them by calling, you're going to have a tough go, real tough go.
Yeah. So. Do you like to work, like in that timbered country, how do you go about, like, for locating them, getting them to answer back to a call, but like what's the best strategy to work through that country? Do you work through the bottoms? Do you work through the ridge lines? Do you look for north-facing timber, or are they feeding on south slopes, or what do you kind of key into to consistently find elk in really low densities?
The north-facing slopes, right? Deep, dark cover.
Okay.
Water, food, and then I like to be loud. I like to get that sound to project, right? Yep. You know, and there's a sequence. We all have our sequences of how we want to do it, whether you start with a cow call or a locator bugle. Personally, I'm a guy, I always start with cow call because you never know if that bull is 50 yards or 2 miles away, and it can happen quick. But I like to get high, and I like to project that sound, and I like to bugle a long ways. Now, I say that to say this. A lot of those elk have smartened up in a lot of places, and you guys can attest to this. Sometimes you have to get in that bubble before you can get him to sound off, right? There's a bull that hears you bugling from ridge to ridge, but until you get close enough, he doesn't want anything to do with you. So that's kind of my strategy. Cover a lot of ground. It's like fishing for perch back home. I don't sit in one hole a long time. I'm mobile until I get a bite. And once I get that perch, then I work that fishing hole or that bull, so to speak. So.
And some of that stuff up there, I feel like the elk, if you find them historically, there's probably going to be a bull there every year or somewhere around. Like you have these spots where they gravitate towards. that maybe are away from the road, or just something about that area that they like. And you can go back and revisit these spots every year. Maybe you'll find one in 1 year, but maybe you won't. But usually there's something to play with, right?
Brian and I talked about the other night, cyclical, right? And Dan, you know this, there's places, yes, they will come back around, but we've had problems, obviously, with the wolves and the predators,
so
like
many
everybody
factors,
else. And
yeah.
then you have hunting pressure, right? We had an influx of people move into Montana, which is good for the economy. It's tough on the elk hunting, recreational, it's busier. There were places that I quit because I could not find elk anymore. I couldn't get a bugle. And now I'm on plan C, D, E, F, and I go back, and all of a sudden they're back 2 or 3 years later. So we talked the other night about things being cyclical, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I don't think they ever leave completely unless, the houses start moving in or there's no more habitat for them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you got to keep checking those places that you've had success before.
Yeah, there's definitely a routine to it. The other question, too, so hunting pressure, it's gotten worse over the last decade or two. I mean, everywhere we've seen more pressure. But how has that affected the hunting in addition to how hard it was 10 years ago, but now with pressure?
So just to back up a little bit, when I first started, I don't even want to say figuring things out, because if you think you ever figure out archery elk hunting, you're getting humbled real quick. So I met a guy by the name of Rocky Jacobson many, many moons ago, 20 years ago or so. And he's the one that really got me on the calling aspect, right?
Yeah.
And he's the inventor of the pallet plate, which way back when, there's no other way to put it, I was a gagger. I would put a diaphragm in and I would basically choke. So a pallet plate is designed, more forward in your mouth so you wouldn't gag. So I get together with Rocky. He starts teaching me a few tricks and tips. Bam, next thing you know, that's deep, deep country, because he's out of Idaho, that Kamiah or Orofino country, steep and deep. Similar type country and same tactics, and that's when I really first started having success with the calling aspect. So I always like to give kudos to Rocky. He's a mentor of mine. He's a huge part of my success. He's a reason where I'm at in the industry today. So very grateful for that.
Yeah. And I feel like Northwest Montana should be like grouped in with the Pacific Northwest, with how thick it is and how much brush it is, how wet it is, the Devil's Club.
Yeah.
Like northern Idaho, it's all thick, nasty, steep, and not a lot of animals.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it gets almost like coastal weather because it's comes over the Cascades, and then that's like the next mountain ranges that it hits. So it reminds me of Western Washington hunting over and through there for sure. So just back to what Dan was saying about your locations. So how many of these spots, like over the years, have you just built like a network of these locations that you're heat checking throughout that? And how many new spots are you checking out, or are you continuing to develop these spots, or is it just like you are going to hit your 15 or 20 spots that you've learned over the years, eventually you're going to run into an elk, or how do you go about it when you start a season?
Great question. Adaptation, right? I'm big on adapting. A long time ago in my baseball career, it's performance based. So you would have the brass come into town that night and they want to see a hard slider down and away, and they want to see you command it. And you better be able to do it that night or in the next couple of days, or somebody else is taking your spot. I apply it to elk hunting. I have a core number of spots in country that I'll hit, and it could be a half mile from a road or 5 miles max. Typically, I do not like to hunt elk or kill an elk 2.5, 3 miles in, because they're big and they're heavy, and packing them out. I mean, the reason we hunt them is to eat them, personally, and I know you guys do as well. So a lot of spots, but I'm adapting all the time. In those places where you're back in and you're like, man, this looks good, but there's nothing here, I always check that box, because it's kind of like, you're moose hunting, right? You guys have both hunted moose, and you do your calling and nothing happens. You go back in the next day and it took forever for that moose to come in. I mean, I don't think that's a secret. I'm not giving away any tips. There might be some Northwest guys that are diehards that hunt and be like, why would you say that? But they might not be there that day, but it's almost like you prep them a little bit, prime them, and the next day they heard you. They're just not going to whistle from miles away anymore because of the predators and the pressure, and they'll be in there the next day. So same old spots, have faith in them. I've carried my bow many, many miles without nothing, and then all of a sudden it happens, right, on day 6. So old spots, but I'm always adapting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like that ability to adapt on a hunt, or that ability to read your encounters and what the elk are doing, because I think every year is different. It's like, yeah, there's similar spots and there's spots you can count on, but it like, I know even my mountain spots that I've hunted for 20 years, last year we got tremendous rains and we had water everywhere. The grass grew really tall. They wanted to be up high. It just seems like the conditions are just a touch different every year, and they visit the same locations and same places, but the rut can be off from a few days of what it was last season. Like, I know, 2 years ago, it's like on the 12th, 13th, 14th, it was just fire. And this past season, same location, same spots, finding elk, and really it was the 15th, 16th, 17th before they started to go off. So I think our ability to adapt to what we're seeing and be able to key into the locations where we are seeing elk and transpose that across that area is like a huge key to success, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I learn a lot. You continue to learn, right? The saying, you never stop learning. And so I watch the guys and gals in the industry and you guys hunt a bunch of different places and states more than I do. And I get to hunt a lot. So I'm picking up on what you guys are doing in different areas. And obviously we're friends, so we talk. But being able to adapt and see your surroundings, your situational awareness on a big scale spectrum with geographical, right? It's huge. I mean, we can go on and on about that stuff because we geek out about it, but I think that truly is one of the most things that you can try to accomplish is to hone your craft, right? And that goes from the calling aspect to the shooting aspect, but to knowing where you're hunting. You got to hunt where the elk are at. You got to find the elk before you can hunt them. Once you find them, then you can hunt them.
I heard a great quote the other day that stuck, where it was, you can't outwork your competition anymore. You have to outsmart your competition. And I don't, I think outworking and day after day and putting in miles, you can separate yourself that way. But I just thought it was a great quote because there's so many guys working so hard. Yeah. And I think the difference is like your intelligence or your wood sense, don't you think?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. There's a saying too, talking to some guys on the North Island in New Zealand, and talking about hunting public land over there, it's just like it is over here hunting elk, except for over there's no tags. Anybody can go any time of year. And that's what they tell you. You won't outwalk a Kiwi. Like, you won't outwalk these guys at all. Mm-hmm. But you can out-hunt them. And I'm not saying I'm a pro red deer hunter from northern New Zealand, but what I'm saying is that's something to think about. And so when you look at most New Zealanders that are hunting public land and they're hiking back in there and they're hunting reds, pretty much the tactic is calling, and what they'll do is just cover country, just like anybody looking for a responsive stag. And I've hunted with some of these guys, and they're great hunters, but if a stag is not responding the way they want it, they'll take off and go try to find one that will respond. And so looking at that, you're like, okay, I need to be able to really take advantage of if I have one situation, I have to figure out how to get that stag killed or that bull killed. And so that's where being resourceful and having all those tools in the toolbox, and like we've talked, spot and stock and calling and having all these skill sets, or at least working towards all these skill sets, that's what's going to set you apart. So instead of trying to call that stag in, I might hind call at that stag, and most guys, it seems like, don't use hind calls. And a hind is a female red deer, for you guys that don't know. And it might take 3 or 4 hours to kill that stag, or to like work in on him and get a shot at him. But that's what it takes. Mm-hmm. And so don't be a one-trick pony. I guess that's the moral of the story is you can out-hunt competition if you put your mind to it and you understand a situation. You can totally do it, and it applies directly to elk hunting on public land in the U.S. as well.
That's such a great point. It's a great point. So speaking to elk hunting, archery elk hunting in particular, I remember the days, and I've been fortunate to hunt a bunch of the western states, Dan, several with you, and when you can find an area where there's a lot of elk, you do have that luxury to pick. That bull's bugling, nope, that bull's bugling. Nah. Ooh, that one, he's fired up. That's where we're going, right? You used to be able to pick that. Now, like you said, you get a game, you got to jump on it.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's my strategy almost everywhere, you know. Last year in Idaho, there were multiple bulls going, but the first one that I heard, I'm like, you know, and it's from hunting back home where it's like you hear a bugle, you're already, thank you, elk gods, you're high-fiving, I got a chance today, right?
Yep.
I'm going after that, and I'm going to make the most of it, and that's where you talk about, you know, well-rounding your skills. You know, you guys are both skilled in not only the spot and stock, but the calling aspect. Dan, I know you worked real hard on that, which is awesome for me to see, because when we became friends a long time ago, that was kind of your thing. You know, you were sneaking in and arrowing these things. You get into the calling game. It just adds another element, right?
Yeah.
Give yourself as much chance to be successful in the woods, whether success is harvesting or not, or getting a bull in close and having that experience of him screaming in your face. I mean, that's why we do it.
That's where I really was able to see my skill set go to the next level, is once you encounter a bull and you can analyze him and come up with a strategy to kill him, and that might be based on, well, it is based on, you know, what he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you what, like, I've had scenarios now where I've been able to see and analyze what a bull is saying and just call that bull in, whereas like before I might have just stalked in on that bull.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's like I can make my life a lot easier and make this hunt a lot easier if I can just, you know, see and analyze and know what this bull is saying, and then if I know what to say back, it's amazing.
Yep.
It's amazing that you make your life so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
And just being, you know, that's what's really elevated my skill set to the next level, I feel like, is taking my calling skill set to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely.
A deeper understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about throwing out a cow call first when you're trying to locate. I think it's really smart. Like those bulls, they can respond and bugle to those cow calls and answer just the same and hear them from quite a ways. And your point is that if they're close, I don't know where they are. So I'm giving them this subtle cow call all of a sudden. And so then a lot of times, even on your locate call, you can have them come in. And so like you kind of get this sequence of moves that works for you, but it's almost a puzzle because every bull has a different personality, responds to something different. And so I think this calling that you do, a lot of it is reading the temperament of that bull, what he responds to. And so like you probably have the sequence of calls you kind of run through to kind of figure out what's going to fire a bull up. And then the longer you play the game, the more elevated this sequence gets, right? And then you know, hey, I'm getting somewhere because he's more fired up. Like this is where I can get him to go in. But is this how you approach like your calling when you're out there?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. You got it, Brian. That's absolutely. So, and I always say, you know, Rocky Mountain hunting calls, we have a lot of world championship elk callers, but I always say you do not have to be a world championship elk caller to kill elk. There are guys that, if you know the basic sounds, timing is a huge part of it, right? Learn your cow-calf call, right? Make sure you have your diaphragm, your external, and your bugle tube. Know a basic locator bugle. And then we get more advanced with our chuckling and all that kind of stuff. But you're absolutely right. Do I actually think I know what elk are saying when you're talking to them? I think instinctual I do, because experience is gold, right? I'm very fortunate. We're very fortunate. We get to hunt elk a lot. And when you hunt elk a lot and you live for the outdoors like we do, and you have a passion for it, you know, if you're blessed, you get to become pretty good at it. And we get to do it a lot. So, yeah, feeling that temperament of a bull, you're absolutely right. Whether it's a soft cow call, and he's coming in, you know, you get him on a cow call, stay on a cow call. You get him on a bugle, stay on a bugle. When you start to advance your skills, can do both. Yeah. You know, and then when you're in some unbelievable places where there's a lot of elk, then you get to play and have a lot of fun, and that's really what we live for. But I say that to say this as well. If I have a bull bugling in the morning, especially where I live, I'm going to call at him just because that's what I do. That's how I've cut my teeth. That's how I make my living. I want to call him in. But I'm not opposed to, if he's bugling like crazy, I'm not opposed to sneaking in on him, putting an arrow in him, right? So it's that well-rounded aspect. But yeah, you judge that temperament, and I and you guys and a lot of people out there can tell how fired up he is, right? Is he just bugling to bugle? Because a lot of them bulls do that. One scenario, but if you go into an area, and you let out a bugle right away, and that bull's 50 yards, and his cows are there, he might take them, high bull to cow ratio type area, or low bull to cow ratio. He might take them, round them up, and leave. Whereas if you'd have given him a little cow call, he's like, these girls don't want to play here, but there's something over there. He might bugle and say, hey, I'm right here, and next thing you know, you're standing over a 300-inch bull with a bow, which is a bull of a lifetime. So, yeah,
There's 2 points there, too. Depending on, how many tags, how much pressure, the predators that are in your area, how many elk are in the area, there's all these little factors that you kind of need to pay attention to before you even go elk hunting. And, like a general unit, say in Idaho, the elk are going to act so much different than they do, like maybe in a limited quota in Montana or Wyoming. Like the elk just acts so much different. Less pressure, maybe less predators. In these areas with higher densities, the elk act differently. And so knowing that too before you even go in a hunt can kind of shape your game plan and shape like how you're going to approach elk hunting in that unit. And every place is different. And that's what's tough too is, knowing the area or knowing, maybe from some past intel from guys. Mm-hmm. That's huge too. Like how do these bulls act in these areas? How much pressure is in a certain area too? You can't ever predict that usually, but that's huge. Mm-hmm. And then like what I really was gravitating towards when you were talking about like the intensity of a bull. And it's almost like, I don't know what they're saying either, but I'm going off the intensity.
Yep.
And that like really dictates how I'm going to approach that bull and how I'm going to call to that bull as well. Like it's hard to explain, but it's just the intensity of that bugle. There can be lazy bugles. You hear a bull maybe just throw out this lazy locator bugle. It doesn't have that piping hot ending or that piping hot high note. And you're like, he could be tough to call in. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's not looking hard. He's just, throwing that bugle out there to say, yeah, I'm here, but yeah, I'm not really looking, satellite bull style. Maybe he already got his butt kicked before. Mm-hmm. Or bulls that have got their butt kicked. It's like, it's a very shy bugle. Mm-hmm. And then there's everything in between all the way up to that, like piping hot, like intense, high intensity bugle that like, yeah, you could probably say whatever to this bull and he's going to come in.
Right.
And so like, and knowing that and just being out there, and it's hard to teach, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
But once you start getting a feel for it, man, it just things come so much easier. The encounters come so much easier. The harvests do too eventually. But that's what's like so attractive for me when it comes to elk hunting is that interaction and learning, and you're progressing, and like it's just something that you can get better and better and better at. Mm-hmm. Can't master it, I wouldn't say that, but that's why it's so rewarding. Is there's all these little aspects that the possibility for each hunter to grow is substantial if you just spend time out there.
Match the emotion, right, guys? You're matching the emotion. And aspects, same word as variables. There's so many variables that have to go right to connect on a bull, whether it's a mature bull or even a cow in the elk woods, right? In the archery elk season to make it happen. And from matching the emotion on the temperament of that bull to, are we going solo? You guys love to hunt solo. You do a ton of solo hunting, just like I do. I don't know if that's because we're atypical and if we're going to mess it up. Well, typically, a lot of times you guys and myself, we have a cameraman now, but do you want to hunt by yourself? Because you have control of everything. But you put Dan and I together, or Brian, Barney and I together, and we have a bull bugling. Now there's two of us. The options are huge, right?
Yeah.
Dan, that bull's not coming down the mountain, but guess what? Sneak in there. I'll keep him bugling and go put an arrow in him.
It changes the game.
It changes the game tenfold.
Yeah. So
there's so many variables, and it's a cat and mouse, right? And that's I get excited talking about it because it's so much fun. And what month are we in? February only? We get to play turkeys a little bit. At least they call at us. But so many variables in the elk archery woods. My thing is hone your craft. Obviously huge proponent in calling. That's my livelihood, Rocky Mountain hunting calls. If they're not fired up, they don't necessarily have to be fired up. We're going to get them fired up. We're going to find them. They're going to make a sound. They're elk. I can't tell you how many places I've hunted or how many people I talk to, guys and gals, like, you cow call or you bugle, they just run away. Well, we hone our craft. And it's timing, right? What kind of bugle are we doing? Are you going out there with a crazy lip ball, like I'm display bugle and I'm the big bad bull, or we go in with a little locator bugle? So experience is gold, so many variables, and we could get into that and talk for hours and hours and hours. And today, this evening, we have dinner or whatever. That's what we do, and that's the fun part of the game, right? Is trying to figure it out. But you're right. Once you think you get it figured out, you get humbled real quick. And the other thing too is, a stigma in the Northwest. I do a lot of my damage there, and it's like, if you kill a bull there, you're better than somewhere else. I am equal opportunist. I'm waiting. And Dan, I've been fortunate. We're good buddies. You've taken me to some places that are like, oh my goodness, this is heaven, right? This is great. Whatever you're afforded to hunt or wherever you can hunt, get out there and go do it. Private, public, all of it. Just get out there and have the experience. And once you do it once, that's the deal, which I'm very grateful. You're hooked. You get into archery elk hunting, you hear bulls bugle, man, there's really nothing like it.
Yeah.
That is the key when you say get out there and go do it. Like, experience is the best teacher, and failure's a prerequisite to success. Like, you're gonna fail, you're gonna mess up encounters, but yet trying to read those bulls, it's like such a chess match as well. Like, we talk about reading the emotion, the intensity, what does he respond to, what does he not respond to. This is all just as important or more important than the actual noises and sounds that you make. And also the nonverbal cues, like sometimes being silent will really fire up a bull to not respond right back, to not overcall. It's like, you have to read the emotions of elk, and sometimes it's a rut fest and there's bulls and cows and it's going off. But then sometimes it's real selective where a bull will bugle and it's like, well, I'm not going to answer him this time. Let's let him look for me a little bit, or I think he's getting curious now. Like, let's not answer him. Or whether you're jumping to cut off a bull, and when you jump to cut off a bull, you usually don't do that in the beginning. You're like trying to build this ebb and flow between you, and usually when you're going to cut off a bull is once they're starting to get really fired up to really step on them, But there's so many nuances, not only that, but rolling rocks or breaking sticks or scratching trees, and sometimes you don't even have to make a call. You can just start rubbing on a tree, and that bull associates that with another bull getting fired up, and then he can come into that. So there's like, it is like such a dance of trying to read and trying to play, and you're really using like all your elk knowledge and skill like every time you get a chance and an opportunity.
There are no secrets anymore, are there, fellas? Brian, what a great point. Sometimes you got to know when to be quiet, right? Yeah. Last year, right before September, I did a podcast with Soul Seekers, and I brought up that point. And it is what it is. You catch a lot of heck for throwing it out there. We're trying to teach and help people, right? I mean, do we want 1 million people in the woods on top of our backs? No, but if somebody can go out there, first-time hunter, and we can give them something, a skill set or a tool to help them be successful, I mean, that means a lot to us, and that's why we're in the business. But to speak to about when to be quiet, that is a huge one, right? Specifically, had a guy call me up after that podcast. He went into an area in Montana that down south, and he had this bull, and he's working this bull, and they're going back and forth. Finally, he's like, I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to move in. I'm going to be quiet. Well, here comes a really nice bull in, because he just shut up. He's like, I'm not playing your game anymore. And elk are elk, and elk are curious. And he had tricked that elk's ears. He had tricked the nose, not the eyes yet, because I hadn't seen him. But by the time that bull came in, he said it was like a half an hour, just nothing. He was ready and was able to put an arrow in that bull and have success. So what a great point. I mean, that's the thing, too, because early on in the careers, he calls, you call. He calls, you call. Why isn't he coming? Stalemate, right? Patience is a virtue. I know both of you guys have incredible patience because you will lay on animals for hours and hours on end. I'm not that great at it. I usually just go to sleep until Dan or someone wakes me up and be like, okay, hey, it's go time. But patience is a virtue. What a great point. Yes.
And honestly, some of my favorite hunts from the past or growing up when maybe I didn't know as much as I do now, or I didn't have the experience. I got into an area and there was 5 or 6 bulls bugling, and I just kind of got into the middle of them, and then I heard a bunch of splashing below me, and I walked down there, and a bull was just tearing up a wallow, and I shot it. And so just knowing when to be quiet sometimes, and just being out there and, using, keep it simple, stupid, right? The KISS principle. sometimes that's the way to go too.
Yep. I think we're the type of guys too, even when you have success, you're overanalyzing it. I'm standing over, you're working up a bull, getting him quartered out, and you're so thankful and blessed, but you're thinking like, man, if I would have done this wrong or not did this would not have worked out. So you're always thinking all about all of those variables and go back to what you've had success with, right?
Yep.
It is like 3D chess too. It's like it's you're playing this game, and so we've talked about these tactics of finding him, working a bull, what he responds to, the nonverbal cues, the communication back and forth. But there's also, I find that next level elk hunters, they really read the country right too. Like they know how to move through country where they're not moving through open parks where they're going to get spotted. They're moving through the timber, and when they really, they're like, in my experience, like a higher understanding of these winds and what they're doing, and then the knowledge of how these bulls come in as well. It's like these bulls want to come in where they're downwind of you, where they can smell this elk, and they're notorious for doing it, like coming into that setup. So if you can use a crosswind and know that the wind's blowing, say, from right to left, for me, I know that bull's probably not going to come in on the right side of me. I know he's going to come in on the left side of me. So now I'm going to set up and look for my lanes and look for openings and trails where he's going to come to the left side of me, even if he's directly below me or directly in front of me, because I know the way that wind's working, how he's going to come in. And I used to always say, it's not the calls you make, it's where you make them from. If you can read where a bull is headed and what he's doing, and like be really like strategizing and thinking like, oh, he's moving to this bedding timber. If I get around to this bedding timber, like he'll probably come in and check me out, instead of just trailing him the whole way up, or just knowing that once they get to where they're going to bed, they really mill around and he's going to check his cows, and like that's a great opportunity to call him in. So I feel like elk knowledge is power out there. It's like it's all these things in one. It's not just like being able to make a great bugle and you're so good on your call, you practice 365 days and you can win any championship. That still doesn't mean that you're gonna kill a bull elk. Like, it is a 3D chess game that you're playing out there with your knowledge and experience.
Absolutely, yeah. And speaking of the World Calling Elk Championships, I just want one. I have second, third, and fourth in 4 years, man. It is fierce up there, man. It is fierce. But you're absolutely right. It's not being the best bugler or the best cow call. It's timing, putting all those variables together. Elk knowledge, it's power, just like you said. So,
and that it kind of goes back to like what Brian was saying. How to move through the woods and some of the basics, and how to move through cover, and as you're kind of describing some, the setups, Brian, I'm thinking about too, like natural barriers. I mean, we could go on and on and on about this, but there's like all these little things, and that's a great way to put it. It's a 3D or whatever a 4D chess
like
match would look like. That's like the best way I can describe it, because there's all these things that you have to nail, and for this to work, for you to kill a bull. If you just like say the perfect thing to this bull and get him to come in, but you fail to set up right, you fail to use the shadows, you fail to use the terrain, you don't pay attention to the wind, like you're not gonna kill that bull. And so that's where all these other bow hunts that you can go on, and what I've been such a strong advocate for over the years is the bow hunting cross training. Just go bow hunting and get repetitions, whether it's pigs, goats, sheep, deer, axis deer, anything. That's gonna teach you all these other things of how to move in the mountains, how do you use natural barriers to your advantage, how to work the wind, what does the wind do in the flats and the draws and the ravines. I mean, we talk about this stuff a lot, but if you can just get experience, this is where it all comes together, right? I mean, we love elk hunting, that's what we probably all cut our teeth doing, but working on all these other aspects of what you need to have happen right for it to work is what it's all about. Like you have to be constantly working at bow hunting in general, and then you also got to be good at hunting elk too. And so it's a 4D chess match or a 5D. It's beyond. It's so hard to describe. It blows my mind.
So Josh, like So a lot of the elk you killed has to be from this elk knowledge and these elk setups. So as Dan talks, maybe expand a bit about natural barriers or really setups that you look for, or like when you know you're getting close, when you don't move anymore, or like what's your game there when you know you're going to call in a bull?
Well, great question. I've had a lot of success because I've screwed it up a lot, a million times, right? To go back, we talk about geographical, right? How aggressive are we being, right? And there's certain places that I hunt. When I hear a bull bugle, I've got to get him killed that day, because I can promise you, and you guys can attest to this, if I wait on him, the wind ain't right, the ridge ain't right in this spot, I'll go in tomorrow. He's 7 miles away. He's gone.
Yeah.
I'm not going to find him again. It's all temperament on getting in on those big brush bulls type. A couple other places I've hunted, Arizona, and had success in Idaho. Idaho is pretty similar to a lot of Montana, but Arizona is more open. I don't know what that pinion stuff, almost like sagebrush from back home, spot and stock, but to get in close, working with soft cow calls, that's how that worked out there. But I go off instinct, a lot of instinct.
Yeah.
The barriers, you got to play the wind. I mean, that is the number one X factor. We have our elk scents and our scent covers, which do I think they help in mass? Absolutely. But if you don't pay attention to that wind, you're uphill battle. The other thing, though, is a lot of us are not afforded, so we hear a bull in the back of a drainage, the wind's not right, but I got to hike 3 miles to get to him. Well, I don't know if I can get 3 miles up that ridge to get to him, so I'm going to make the best of it. You try to get that little bit of a crosswind and half moon him and take a chance. So it's all temperament and wind, and then obviously when rubber meets the road and it's time to execute and make that shot, you're cool, calm, and collected, and like you've practiced a million times before. Bottom third and boiler room, and hopefully it works out.
Yeah.
You baseball players have an advantage. That is such a game of like, in baseball is really athletic, but it's so hand-eye coordination, and it's so like being clutch or being at your best in these big moments. And I think like you still have to go through the failures and misses, I'm sure, to learn your lessons, but I do feel like baseball players have a real advantage and are able to shorten that learning curve so much quicker because you've been under those high pressure moments, like so much like having to perform in split second of having to perform with that hand-eye coordination. Like I have a buddy that was played really good college ball and then a little bit of AAA, and he just learned so quick, and then he's so clutch with that bow, and he learns it in half the time that I did or a third the time I did. But I just feel like that really lends itself to elk hunting, doesn't it? Doesn't it give you an advantage out there?
Yeah, absolutely. That and being superstitious, right? I do the same thing in a lot of the same ways, but you're right. The hand-eye coordination and trying to be cool, calm, and collected in pressure situations. But I'll say that because if your heart's not beating when that bull's coming in, I mean, it doesn't have to beat out of your chest like in the earlier days, but still, if you're not getting that heart beating and that blood flowing, then it's probably, it's not for you. And a lot of times I catch myself, I get to watch the video afterwards, and I'm like, man, I look really calm and whatnot, but it looks like I'm doing it easy, but inside, I'm trying not to breathe. I'm slowing down the heart rate. I'm trying not to blink, and then when it's done, I say archery elk hunting is the most anticlimactic thing you can do, right? You work so hard to get it done. Arrow's gone, and now you have a 750, 800-pound bull laying there, and you're like, fight or flight, It's like, okay. So, yes, I think your athleticism does help, but in the end, experience is gold. And if you're not out there doing it and getting those encounters wherever you may be, it's tough. It's a tough learning curve. I have a couple of really good elk hunting partners. One from my long-term one from way back in the day who taught me a ton. And then, a cousin of mine, Dan, knows real well, JD. He's kind of one of my primary hunting partners there. And I'll tell you what, Doug taking me under his wing 20-some years ago with Rocky, how they did it and survive with me, I don't know, because you're messing so many things up. Yes, and you do learn quick, but it's tough, right? Yep. And how JD is stuck with me, he doesn't have a choice, he's family, because it's not easy. If you want to be successful, you really have got to be into it, right? You got to live for it and have that instinct of, man, I want to be successful and figure it out. And it all comes down to the 5D chess game, right? The challenge. And that's what it's about.
It's interesting too, thinking about this as you guys are talking. Natural ability helps a lot And I've had a conversation with my brother, and he's a very analytical mind. He's an engineer, and he's told me, he's like, I just don't feel like I'm ever going to be a good elk hunter because I overthink everything. Like, I can't just let it happen, or I can't just have an instinct to know what to do. Like, I try to overanalyze, and before I know what's happened, my opportunity is gone. And I think you can't teach that, really. I don't believe. It's how we're wired. Everybody's wired differently, but I do know, based on your personality, you could struggle more than somebody like what Brian was describing too, as you're a natural baseball player working in the clutch. It's something that just, you don't get to AAA by just being average. You're a freaking good player if you get to the minor leagues, right? And so if you have that cool, calm collectiveness, that does carry over to elk hunting, but just not everybody has it. And it can be taught. If you have the right personality, I believe it can be taught. But it's an interesting. I think about this a lot when my brother's like, "I'll never be a good elk hunter. I'm just I overanalyze things," and so that's what's really helped me too. And I think if you talk to my family or my close friends, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, Dan. He's happy-go-lucky. Flies by the seat of his pants." And you have to be like that too, but you also have to be calculated. It's a mix, it's a dance, it's something that you have to find the middle ground of being analytical and calculated, but also be able to fly by the seat of your pants and roll with the flow as well.
Yep. The old saying is, you'd rather be lucky than good, right? I think we're very lucky, but we've also tried to hone the craft. And it starts at the lowest level with your health, right? Still blessed to have good eyes, good hearing, and good smell. If you're missing one of those three in the elk woods, you're already a little bit behind. But not to say in an area, let's say for calling, that's how I do it, guys. I make my living. That's my bread and butter. I can't see as well. I can't smell as well. Maybe not even hear, but I get closer. If I can get them to call, at least know where elk are at, I'm at least in the game. So we just talk about that. You guys can hear good, you can see good, you can smell good. You already have a one-up, right? So take that into consideration. Not everybody's going to have the same advantages that we have, but work in a different area, right? Maybe it's physical shape. Maybe it's somebody that can shoot a bow at 6 yards and pinwheel if the shot is right. I don't know. Work on the whole craft and make yourself better.
So important, man. Yeah, I love it. There are all these different skill sets, and I think you have to look at it objectively and work on your weakest link. For you, you're really clutch, so maybe you work harder on your physical fitness or your map research to be able to find bulls where you hunt, or whatever the case is. And I think you can practice that being clutch too. That elevated heart rate is something that we can guarantee everybody's gonna have, and so for me, I'll run through my practice routines and I'll get my bow all dialed, but then it really is practicing this elevated heart rate, to be doing my push-ups and pull-ups and back there and draw back that bow and go, wow, that pin really isn't settling on that target, but I'm still going to execute a good shot. And once you get good at it, I can get my heart rate so high and be shooting, I shoot a lot of Vegas indoor during the wintertime just because it's not light outside, and so I can kind of put a score to my shooting, but I'm not just shooting for the best score. I'm shooting a round off my knees, or I'm shooting a round where every time I do 5 pull-ups, 10 push-ups, and then I shoot my bow, and I notice my arms get more jello-y, the pin doesn't aim quite as good, but I just keep believing in the process of pull, and I actually shoot decent scores and really good rounds, even with this high heart rate above 100 beats a minute. And I think getting used to that, and then shooting with high pressure situations, and high pressure can be shooting with your buddy for $1 and you're going to get ribbed if you don't hit the center, or whatever the case is, or shooting around people in shops is this real intense moment, but when you get used to shooting in front of people, it's not exactly like shooting at an elk, but it's shooting under high pressure, and it's shooting with elevated heart rate, it's shooting with uneven footing. It's really preparing yourself for the way the mountains are going to be.
Next level stuff right there, Brian. Yeah. Not everybody's out there doing that, guys and gals, elevating the heart rate and then shooting. What a great point, right? Another thing, and we all know it because we've been there and we've done that, perseverance.
Oh,
right?
The number one important thing.
Perseverance.
Yeah.
The biggest attribute you could have, and what I all think we have at the table. That's such a great point.
Yeah.
Perseverance. A couple of years ago, a good friend of mine, we won't mention any names, Dan, says, hey, let's go hunt Colorado. Let's go hunt way high in elevation. Let's go chase these elk. Let's do it. Tough hunt, awesome hunt, great experience. The elk were not there. But it was tough, man. Hard to breathe up there, the whole 9 yards. So that's how we started out the season. You get home and you're kind of, oh, man, all right, I'm either feeling good or not feeling good. Well, 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to kill a really giant bull in the country that's going to be my claim to fame. That guy. I don't even want one like that big in that country. I don't know if one lives, but the fact to be able to see one and have an opportunity, I'm so thankful. I say that to say this. I come back from that hunt. I'm already tired, right? It's raining at the trailhead. I'm like, man, do I really want to hike in there and do it? And you're just sitting there. You're about ready to go back to sleep in the truck. It's like, no, that's what I'm here for. I'm here. That's what next thing you know, you're laying over a bull of a lifetime. Perseverance, Not to say there aren't a lot of times I have slept in that truck at the trailhead. Like, now I can't make it today. But if you have that little extra, and which is the your physical fitness you train for, that little bit of perseverance, only good things can happen.
So, yeah, for sure.
So thanks for taking me on that hunt and killing me, Dan.
Well, I think that motivated me too, because
awesome.
That was, like you said, the first one of the season, and then I came back out of that, and I was pissed. Like, and we've talked about this too. Like, you got to hunt angry. Like, hunting angry can be effective.
Yeah.
But like, this was an area that, I did my homework. It was supposed to be. There was supposed to be numbers. It's supposed to be good. Like, it has the history, but that just goes to show you that not every year is the same.
No.
And we didn't find them. They were down lower. It was a really wet year. We talked to some outfitters. They really struggled that year too.
Yeah.
But that just goes to show you that, you can come up with the best plan, and if the elk aren't there, you have nothing.
Yeah, and then you try to Tommy top me. I think you killed a big giant bull. Yeah, you killed a giant that year too. Giant.
What day did you kill your bull?
22nd.
Yeah, and I killed mine the 8th, I think, or the 9th.
Yeah, you had the big, and then I
the
remember
380 bull. We both killed giant bulls that year.
You got a big one. I'm like, yeah, big. And then I send it to you, and they're like, yeah. So it just how that worked out, right? We started the season, which was a great hunt. What a great experience, man.
Yeah.
If you never hunted elk at 14,000 feet, I recommend going to try it. Get in physical shape and have fun breathing up there. But it was fun. Scenery, gorgeous. If the elk were there, it would have been very good. But it prepared you. We send those texts, like, hunting angry today.
Yeah.
And you got to have that confidence, right? Your perseverance and your confidence. If you're going out in the elk woods and you're thinking it's not going to happen, or the mule deer woods, whatever it is, you're behind the 8 ball.
Yeah.
You got to believe that you can make it happen. So.
Yep.
Yeah, that perseverance. Well, and taking chances too. You guys took a chance in a new unit and researched it and went there, and the fact of the matter is like taking these chances, hunting new areas, going for tags that you can draw with the points that you have. You are taking chances. Like, you try to get all these factors in your favor when you go hunt a place, but it's not going to be 100% where you kill a bull every time. And every once in a while, whether it's the unit, whether it's the conditions, whether it's the pressure, the timing, all these factors, like, you are going to strike out. But in turn, you guys killed your biggest bull that year, and that was part of the process, is going to that place, but then continuing to hunt afterwards, so that was like a big part of your journey for that season. So I got to get on your guys' program, man. That was a couple giant bulls. That was pretty awesome.
Failure is a prerequisite.
Yeah.
In all aspects of bow hunting, elk hunting, and if it doesn't drive you, then it's not for you.
Yeah.
Like, failure has to drive you to want to be better, to try harder, to, like you're saying, at the trailhead, it's dark, it's cold, it's raining, you don't feel like going, but if you have that drive, sometimes that's all it takes, is just that little extra drive on that one morning that matters.
There you go.
Well, it can be so difficult too. It's like, we sit here and we think about perseverance and going hard and trailheads when it's raining, but when you're out there and you've been going hard for 5-6 days and you haven't seen or heard an elk, or it's just, it feels like mission impossible, or like this last hope that you could even kill something. But when you continue to put forth that effort, you create opportunities. And maybe it's not like last year where you walked right into the rut fest, or maybe it's not like that encounter 2 years ago, you know, where everywhere you went you saw elk. And so you get these tough seasons, but the difference is like your ability to grind, your ability to persevere, to continue to put forth that effort. And believe in the process, and eventually you get an opportunity to 6-point. At least that's my, my experience is like, I just know if I keep trying, no matter how tough this season is. And this past season, like, I was on the ropes. I had that cameraman come. We put in a ton of effort. We chased good bull. Couldn't make it happen. I had done a couple early season mule deer hunts that didn't pan out. And so, here I was kind of on the ropes, but I've been here so many times before that I just know it doesn't matter what the date is, doesn't matter what we're getting towards the end of September, I will earn an opportunity.
There you go.
And then, it wasn't but a couple days later, I arrow a bull and had a great late season with muleys and able to arrow some muleys. But it's just, I believe in it. And even in a tough season, I'm going to grind it out and have a great season. I'm going to figure it out.
Yep. It's gold what sleeping in one morning, hot cup of coffee, make sure you get a good meal, reset, refocus, start the fire and get back after it. Yeah. And we've all been there and done that. And hopefully the listeners, you'll understand it is tough. If archery, elk hunting in specific, or high country mule deer, or any of the hunting was easy, everybody would do it and everybody be successful, and probably wouldn't be that fun. I know it wouldn't be for me. If it were easy, man, it wouldn't. There's a lot of people, guys and gals out there that make it look easy, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's just not easy, and I think that's why we love it. We love to hunt, persevere, stay on it, hunt till the last day, the last minute, and as long as you leave it on the table and you can go home and look yourself in the mirror, and man, that was fun, right? It's supposed to be fun.
Yep.
So.
Yep, that's it. Well, man, it's so fun to get you on the podcast. We got to have you on again. That was such a high-level conversation, and then I just think you have such a great understanding of the elk woods. Or I know you hunt all over in different species, but man, I love hearing you talk about your elk hunting and describing it, and so many similarities. And then just like you started the conversation of being a student of the game, and there's so much great information from great hunters out there, and it's being able to take this information and apply it to your own hunting and get better. And this is like a lifelong journey. You didn't get to where you're at killing these bulls in 1 year or 2 years. This is a lifetime of you really dedicating yourself to the craft and getting better and improving, and then you go into each season better. So man, it's just really fun to have you on the podcast and have Dan here. This is like the perfect 3-person conversation all about hunting elk. So I really enjoyed it, man. It's really fun.
I appreciate it, guys. Getting to be with, we say like-minded, but just people, we're friends and all that, and we live for it. And I think we do our best to be students of the game and then help everybody else out there. That's what we're in the business. Yeah. It's fun. We could sit here and talk for hours and hours and hours, which would be easily done, and then we'll probably get in trouble from the bosses to be. But I appreciate it. I look forward to doing it again. Thanks for making the time this morning, and it's always a pleasure.
Yep. All right. Thanks, guys.